Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
And so it becomes a continuing cycle. Well, during the continuation of this cycle, naturally my psychological standpoint changed because I'm still fighting battles because we went through this, we went to court, I done it their way, and still to the same result.
Right.
You know, and it got to a point where I become totally exhausted. I exhausted many options, not all of them, because naturally there would have been some options I could have took, but I got to a point where I decided it was time to check out. And so it was a Saturday. I had woken up that morning and I decided, hey, look, it's the time for me to go ahead and check out today. I'm exhausted. I can't see my daughter. I can't have a relationship with my child. And I can't get help nowhere, or I feel I can't get help nowhere to fight this battle. And I'm just tired. Like I'm mentally exhausted. So I took and I rode and I went and I bought a gun to shoot myself with. Well, during the commence of this, I taken and I was renting a house from a friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because I've seen suicides, homicides, all of these type of different things, different tragedies, different accidents, and during these scenes and incidences, they could be pretty gruesome. And well, because I was renting a house from a friend of mine, I am pretty thoughtful, and I was like, I can't do this to my friend, like, because they're going to have to come in and clean this up, and they're going to have to see all this, and so I decided that wasn't the route I was going to go.
It's funny now. I know it wasn't funny in that moment, because I know you didn't think that to yourself and go, but now it's funny because you're out of it, and the lives that we've lived, we have that darker sense of humor where you can laugh at that kind of thought process. But carry on.
It wasn't necessarily
hard.
funny when I was going through it at that particular
right.
point in time, but to me it made sense.
Right.
And so at that point, I started. I ended up going to the hospital about 2 weeks prior to all this, and because of our connection with people in first responders scenarios and things, and our relationships there that we have with first responders, when I went for some medical conditions, and they end up over medicating me because of my position and who I was and things of that nature, right? And they done it with intents to help me, and so I wouldn't be in pain and I wouldn't hurt, and to help me get better.
So they gave you extra pain pills?
Correct.
Okay.
So, well, I couldn't take them because I couldn't function on what they had given me.
Right.
So I got them filled, and I never did take them because I couldn't function on a regular basis. So I chose just to hurt at that time as well. So I done my research after, and I looked up and I saw what I had to take so I can go ahead and check out. Well, obviously I had way more than what I needed. During my research time, there was something that I don't know why, but I chose to get up and I left and I went to Mass. I go and I sit in Mass for about 20 minutes. As I'm sitting there, something comes over me, and then I say, okay, it's time to go ahead and check out. So I get up and I leave Mass and I go to my house. Once I get there, I go and I take this medication that was prescribed to me, and I take all of it. And we're talking about probably somewhere in the ballpark of, say, 150 to about 175 pills.
Right. So an overabundance.
A lot.
An overabundance of medication. Right. Well, once I take that, I took and I went and hid everything. That way, if someone found me, they wouldn't know what to do to help me.
Right.
Because at that point, I was tired, I was defeated, and I just didn't want no help no more. So I went and hid those, and then at that point, I went and I unlocked the back door so no one would have to tear up the residence, and then I go and I unlock the front door. Well, when I go to unlock the front door, there was a friend of mine who was actually just coming by the house just to talk and say, hey, what's up, and all this. Well, I saw him traveling down the road, and I didn't even know he was coming. He may have tried to call me and I didn't answer. He may have tried to text and I didn't answer. I don't know. But he was on his way to my residence. Well, at that time, I collapsed in the doorway. Well, when I collapsed, I could see and I could hear, but my verbal language wasn't where I was able to respond proficiently. And so they get there and they check, because the ambulance service comes and they check my blood pressure and everything. And at that point, my blood pressure ends up being 60/10, and they put me on the stretcher, and at that point I black out. I wake up approximately about 2 weeks later or so, and I'm at the hospital. When I come to, they had a little nurse in my room because obviously they didn't think I was going to pull through.
Right.
And whatnot. And I end up having to go, once my vitals and everything were back to normal and back to regular, I end up having to go to a psych facility to go get checked out due to trying to check myself out.
Right.
So I go there, and when I get there, like, I'm already clear-headed and clear thinking when I get there, truthfully. And I'm there for 3 days because they put a 72-hour hold on me. And once that 72 hours was up, I got released and I came back home. Well, when I came back home, like, I understood the severity of what happened and what took place. And I understood my actions were selfish and everything. So at that particular point in time, the first thing I did, because I take pride in my friendships and relationships with others, and I didn't want nobody to have to carry that burden, because like I said, I made many attempts to ensure that nobody knew. My district partner didn't know, like my friends didn't know, nobody knew I was in the condition I was in. So I went to anybody who was very important to me, and I went to them and I apologized for what happened. And I told them what happened. And, you know, a lot of these guys that I had spoke to, they were people that I had worked with in law enforcement for, 10, 15 years, or that I've knew they was in law enforcement before I got there. And I looked up to these people, and, I had great relationships with these guys. And after I shared my story with them as to what happened, and I apologized to them and told them I didn't want them to carry this burden, many of them shared stories with me where they went through similar things and they had negative thoughts and negative opinions, and they didn't reach the point I did during that particular point in time, but they was almost there.
Right.
And some of them was there and just had a change of heart at that point in time when rubber met the road.
Right.
And so, and that was something, after speaking with them as well, that was it brought a peace over me in a sense, because these are people, some of them was folks that I looked up to and that I admired from a law enforcement perspective. And, they were guys who were, they've been in the business for a long time. They had rank. They had things that, that you try to thrive for and that you want to get during your career. And as that policeman, because you always want to try to better yourself and you always want to try to excel in what you do. And these were things that I never knew about these individuals. And I mean, we fought battles together. I would have gave my life for many of them, and I never knew that they fought struggles and the same battles that I had fought, because as men, we just don't talk about those things amongst one another. So it showed me that there was light at the end of that tunnel, that there was hope there, you know. And so I took and I was relieved of my duty due to the actions that I personally took. And so I went and I had a discussion with upper administration, and they was by far extremely nice, very respectful. They bent over backwards to help me at that particular point in time. They would have helped me if they would have knew what I was going through
Right.
during that
Beforehand,
tenure
right.
beforehand. They just didn't know.
and that's,
Extremely
I
top
think-
notch, very professional
Right.
organization that I was with at that time. And I was very proud to call myself part of that family
Right.
because of how they did take care of me and the things that they did do during this struggle.
Right. So I know it's one of the things we've talked about several times where, unfortunately, the longer you spend going around the sun, you get the phone calls from friends saying, hey, so and so decided to take his life,
Right.
or whatever, and we, you have the conversations, where it's always a shock. Nobody goes, I've been waiting on that. Like not the first time have I
Right.
gotten a phone call, and know that, hey, a funeral's about to have to take place, and be
Yeah.
like, I've been waiting on that. It's been time. It's always like, man, like it hits you like a dart,
Right.
and
you always ask the same.
you always,
same
man,
stupid question. You always
it's
ask yourself, like, what could I
is
have
is
done?
is there something I could have done different?
Right.
But and that's what I want to, for the listeners, it's, sometimes there's not something you could do different, and what I mean by that is, like in your story, like you mentioned, you went out of your way to make sure that nobody knew what was going on.
Yep.
The people that you after you talked to them about your experience, they told you theirs, and you had no clue
Right.
what was going on.
Correct.
And that's, I think part of it is, we've got kind of a pride thing where we just don't want to talk about it
Yep.
because in our mind we think that it presents us as being weak, or I know in a law enforcement standpoint, that it takes, and if I don't present myself as being squared away and top notch and all this other stuff, then I'm gonna get looked over as I'm not gonna get a promotion, not gonna get a transfer that I want or whatever, and so you bottle things up, and it winds up just going down the same where you don't get any help at a time where it could have prevent you from going somewhere else.
Right.
Now, I do want to ask you one thing. The friend who showed up at your door, the day that everything took place, was it normal for him to come to your house, or was that kind of a rare
An
occasion?
anomaly.
Right.
It was a very rare occasion. To be
Okay.
honest, prior to him coming to my house that day, he may have been to my house one other time.
Okay.
And at this particular point in time, this was an individual, as far as the same agency wise, I had worked with him for about a year and a half or so at
Yeah.
this point. And during that year and a half that I had worked with him, he's never been to my house but once prior to that occasion.
Right. Right.
So
Okay.
it's just a off the cuff. He just
Yeah,
happened
just-
to be
Yeah,
right place, right time.
right place, right time.
So one of the things that I want to touch on is that like you said, we're guys who don't really talk about that. I think that we've talked about it before. There's a stigma that we can't step up and start talking about these things, our feelings, and I'm at the bottom of my barrel, or one, we don't want to look weak, and two, we don't want that judgment of everybody that works with us to either look down on us because of our personal life, or to judge us as a weaker man because you hit the bottom and you're like, I'm done. I want to be out. And it's kind of what I picked up from your story, is that there were certain times where you were like, I'm not telling anybody what's going on. I'm going to fake the funk at work so nobody questions what's going on. But when I get home and we say, it's supposed to be my happy place, my safe place, my house, that wasn't your safe place anymore. That was like your dark tomb.
It was, and like that was very important for me too. Like, because I put a lot of effort to make sure nobody knew.
Right.
And so when I done what I done, it was extremely important to me that I made sure that nobody tried to carry that burden from my
Right.
actions, because I didn't give nobody a sign. It wasn't something where somebody said, oh, I saw this or oh, I saw that, and man, what if I'd have done this? Like there wasn't nothing.
Right.
Like the only, and I'm not trying to cast blame on nobody because nobody done nothing wrong, but the only true way you would have known is, and we have such hectic schedules to begin with as a law enforcement personnel that, and how we work and things like that is, if you'd have just showed up at my house, you know, and I'm not trying to cast blame and say, oh, it's their fault they didn't show up,
Right.
you know, but we all have lives, we all have children, we all have wives and our own little thing. But when somebody called me, I literally sit there and I watched the telephone ring.
Right.
When somebody sent me a message on Facebook, I literally didn't open it. Like I got the notification, I just didn't open it. When somebody sent me the text message, I got the message, I just didn't open it. So the only thing that anybody could have done truthfully was show up at my house, and then probably, to be perfectly honest, I probably would have put up the same front that I had while I was at work.
Right.
And they probably, with the exception of them realizing that I cut off my direct TV and didn't have television.
Yeah, hey, this dude's got a chair and nothing else in his apartment.
You know,
That's
like
right.
Well, let me ask you this: Did anybody ever ask you? And this is a two serious question. Did anybody ever ask you, "Hey, Kenny, are you okay?"
No, because nobody had a reason to question whether I was okay or not.
Gotcha. Okay. Won't be a second part thing, cause
Yeah, shut
that's-
that one down.
right?
Because,
That's
like-
the thing that we talk about is
Like naturally, right, when we work with our district partner or our shift, right?
right,
We go and we have coffee with them, or we go and we go to lunch together,
right. Park
and
up
things, and
yeah.
we park up and we meet and we talk and things. But like during all those things, nobody was there to pick up and notice that there was a change here or there was a change
Right.
there. Like I still showed up for the little coffee drinks in the morning. I showed up for the lunches. Like no, when I was on duty, nobody knew any different than what I was prior to than what I was there. Nothing affected my work. The way I treated my coworkers, the way I treated citizens, none of my work was ever affected.
Right.
So it wasn't like, you know, oh, well, Kenny's having excessive use of force complaints during this time, right? Oh, well, we could link it back to that. Like, none of that ever transpired for me because my work never did suffer from what I was personally going through.
Do you think your work was like a highlight for you? Not so much like the bright spot of your day, but like able to step out of your reality? Like work was your escape from that darkness?
I'm unsure. I know during my tenure as law enforcement, every day I got up and I went to work. I took pride in what I'd done. I was very happy to put on the uniform that I put on, whether it was for this agency, that agency. You never saw me looking like all chewed up. Like my shoes were always
Right,
clean. I was always
I
ironed.
will give you that. I've only
I
seen
look-
you have dirty shoes one time, and that was when you were walking in the mud in my backyard.
Yeah, yeah.
He was not happy that day.
Like I always took pride in my appearance as far as, you know, I always looked professional. My
Right.
clothes were always ironed. Like I wouldn't, you know, some people just don't take that extra measure in law enforcement, to be honest. And not just law enforcement, but just
in
as
general, yeah.
in
right.
general. And I took such pride in that nobody could have, nothing was going to affect my work.
When you were in that dark time, if somebody would have said, "Hey, Kenny, you want to go get a burger after work or on a day off or something," do you think you would have taken that?
No.
Look at him. He eats burgers.
I understand, but he just said no. So your joke was shot down.
Once, to be honest, during that time, I would have made an excuse to turn down that invitation from
Right.
someone. And I would have turned down the invitation, and it would have been followed up by a lie
As to why you couldn't go.
as to why I couldn't attend.
So let me ask you this: if you were to find yourself today, hopefully not immediately after you leave from this podcast. But if you were to find yourself today in that same headspace, what do you think your out of it would be, or where do you think you'd go with it?
Well, let me touch on that briefly here for a second, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna answer your question. Okay, so I told you that I ended up losing my position, and the agency I was at was 100% stand up. They took care of me. They look after me. They made sure I was squared away. They didn't. They didn't have no ill feelings toward me for what happened. I took responsibility for the actions and what transpired and everything. And we ended up, even though I had to leave, we still left on very, very great terms. So I end up leaving, and I end up reaching out and going to go get some help. So I went and I talked to some therapists during this time, and I talked to several different therapists. I talked from some from different areas as well, because my thought process is, if I can get an okay, or if I can get a clear understanding, not just from this one person, but these other people,
Right.
then I know I'm okay.
Right.
Because we can all talk to just one person, and then if we just base it off of what that one person says, then that doesn't always mean we're okay.
Second opinion.
And so I always try to get the second opinion, third
Right.
opinion. So during this tenure, I reached out and I went and talked to some therapists. Now, prior to this, if you would have said, "Hey, Kenny, you want to go talk to a therapist?" I was out.
Right.
Like, therapists don't know me. I don't need to talk to them. Man, I can handle my stuff. I don't need to speak to a therapist. Well, because I went through all of this, like, I did a whole lot of self-reflecting. And so I understood that I had an issue and I had a problem at this point. It took me a while to get there. I mean, obviously, I made the bad decisions prior to deciding I needed help. But once I made the bad decision, I understood that I needed the help. Well, it was 6 months had passed to the day of me getting called in and asked me to turn in my stuff. 6 months to the day, I get called by administration, and we sat down, and he told me, that he never saw no one hit rock bottom and recover that quickly. And because of the improvements I made and the things that I was doing personally for myself and my mental health, that he wanted to offer me my job back. So I was allowed to go back and return to law enforcement after this incident. It only took me about 6 months. For me to get there, like I said, I had to do a whole lot of self-reflect.
Right.
And I had to take responsibility for what happened. During talking to these therapists and talking to these other people and everything, one thing that I gained from that was, it's okay to talk about these things. You don't need to be embarrassed, because more people fight these battles and struggles than what we like to admit. So, and what I've learned since the incident, when I was that it's not a weakness to go and talk to somebody, because if I share my testimony or my story, whatever you want to call it, with these individuals or with someone, that may help them or help someone who's fighting that same battle that never would have asked for that help.
Yep.
Because when I went through that, it wasn't that I didn't have people that I could pick up the phone and say, "Help me." It wasn't that I didn't have anyone that would have just flat out refused me and just, "Oh, look, Kenny's messed up. Let's just shun him and move on." So, man, I had 500 something contacts in my phone. I could have probably reached out and made many a contacts with many of those people, people that I went to post with, that you built that bond going through that endeavor. Or, people that I've worked with throughout the years. Some of them still in law enforcement. Some of them was out and decided to choose different career paths. I could have called many of those people. Some of the folks that I grew up with, that chose whatever path career wise, I could have reached out to those people. So it wasn't that I was a hermit and just didn't have nobody. It was that I chose not to reach out to individuals.
Right. Right.
Well, so I know that I started working at the same agency that you used to work at, and I know that they had they called it the EAP, the Employee Assistance Program,
Right. I always
where
make fun of it.
you could seek help via a therapist, through the department. One of the things that, because I've got a therapist that I'm seeing in regards to an incident that took place months back, and when I first started going, it was like, I felt dumb talking about a lot of what was going on in my brain and
Right.
and thought processes and whatever situation I have going on, and they made a statement that I find very intriguing. Right, if when you look at cops, we're trained in defensive